Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for being. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me today in Dad's Crib. My name is Randy, and we are on to episode one. Well, the first one was technically episode one, but I consider that the launch episode. And if you didn't listen to it, it kind of goes into why I started this podcast. What. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me today. Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me today on another episode of Dad's Crib. My name is Randy, and we are on to episode one. The first episode I basically consider a launch episode, so I am calling this one episode one. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the launch episode, please do so. It basically breaks down why I decided to start this podcast and what I hope the outcome will be. So, this one will also be solo because I think it's important for me to tell you why I thought it was a good idea to start this and kind of give you a little bit about my background and tell my story and talk about my journey as a what I consider all in and or new era type dad. So again, thanks for hanging out with me here in Dad's Crib. I mean, I can't really say I'm an expert, but I have spent 15 years in the when I say the trenches, I've been in the trenches of parenting and raising kids, and so I myself have two boys. One's 15 and one is 12. And due to our careers at the time, my first one was born. I quickly found myself in the role of the primary caretaker. I always referred to her as the 9 to 5er and the corporate person, but in reality, those hours were much more than that. Her position at the time required her to travel for days at a time. Sometime there was the meetings and the lunches and dinners and interviews, and so on the other hand, I was a freelancer and I worked from home a lot. We were living in a new city, and I didn't have a lot of clients, so I quickly became what amounts to a stay-at-home dad. This was after, of course, she went back from maternity leave, and I did the diapers, feedings, parks, jamboree, story time, you name it, we did it. And this all started with my first one. And 3 years later, my second one came, and it just kind of continued. And at the time, I was really in uncharted waters. I didn't know or had never met another dad that was this involved in the day-to-day raising of their kids. Of course, I knew there were single dads. I knew there were stay-at-home dads. I personally just didn't really know any. And so, um, it, when my oldest was about one, we moved back to our original town, and I was able to reconnect with some of my old friends and colleagues. And some were new parents, and some had kids that were much older. But I really didn't think about that before. And before the normal conversation, would basically be how's the kids, and really didn't progress much more than that. We didn't discuss a lot of parenting. Now I was super dad basically, and it was kind of my focus. So we just found ourselves spending a lot of time talking about our kids and parenting. And at some point, I just realized like I was surrounded by some really awesome men, and I had the pleasure of knowing some really cool dads. And they were kind of all in types, different than what I was. They most of them still did the 9 to 5 plus thing, and but they were there and going to games and doing the things that they needed to do to physically and mentally support their kid. And I kind of became really interested. I mean, extremely interested in why we were so different from fathers of past generations, because we were. And that's not a knock on the fathers of the past, but we was just dadding, as I like to call it, on a whole different level than the generations before us. At least the dads I knew. Maybe this was the way dads in suburbia always parented, But the dads where I was from, they were either non-existent for many reasons, or they were, working multiple jobs and probably had a side hustle just to make ends meet. So spending this type of time with kids like we do was definitely unheard of. But it just seems like a different era. We're not only invested in our kids' physical well-being, we are also very, interested in our kids' well-being. And I just feel like that requires a different level of commitment. And man, I can honestly say I was fully committed. At some point, the, you know, my boys with a Z, I always call them the boys, had become my life and basically my identity. You know, I really got a good idea of what moms meant when they say after I had kids, I kind of lost my identity. That was me. I became less referred to as Randy and more, hey, there's RJ's dad or the boy's dad. It was more with RJ. Everywhere I went, it was like, hey, there's RJ's dad. Or when I would be introduced, it's like, hey, this is RJ's dad. So at some point, I just started introducing myself as RJ's dad. And that honestly, that didn't really bother me at all. So from the time they were born until a few years ago, we pretty much spent most of, if not all of our time together. One, because it didn't, like I said, it didn't bother me. They needed care, and I'm a bit of an introvert and kind of recluse most of the time, and so I really enjoyed their company, and still do. We have a very interesting relationship, and on my son and I have a podcast, and on that podcast he mentioned how not that kids thought it was strange, but he felt like he would think it was kids would think it was strange if they realized how good of a relationship we had. They kind of call me first on things and I call them first on things. And so, that is just kind of the relationship we had. So we spent a lot of time together. And, basically when they were young, they didn't have a choice. They had to hang out with me because they didn't really have any money or transportation to leave. So they was kind of stuck with me. The only time we really wasn't together was when I had a gig, but I didn't really do a lot of overnight or travel jobs. And at one point, I could count on my hand how many days I wasn't there for them when they woke up or, went to sleep. And usually it was both. When I was working, however, when I was working, however, a lot of my clientele was high level corporate executive types, and we would usually get into a chat, and they would ask if I was a freelancer, and then or if I was staff, and I would always say I'm a freelancer, and they would say if when you're not working, what do you do? And I would always say I raised two boys, and then we would get into these discussions about kids, if they had any, and my kids and how much time I spent with them, and how I coached all their teams and things like that. And it would just never fail. They would always go, man, that's great. The one thing I wish I could have done is spend more time with my kids. And they would inevitably say, cherish this time. It goes so fast. So after hearing that over and over, I knew I was doing the right thing for me. At some point, I think you have to decide what's more valuable for you. And, for some people, there's value in chasing fun. There's value in chasing fame, and there's value in chasing more money and, success. And honestly, like, that is 100% okay. And I don't judge anybody if that's your thing. But for me, I knew the time invested in my boys was where I found my happiness and where I found value. And plus I was 36 when I had my kids. So, it was old enough that I had done a lot of hanging out and partying and having fun. And I knew it was going to be, I was going to have time afterwards. And so, to rededicate myself to my career and, and stuff like that. And so Um, as they got older, another reason it was important was, because as they got older and started school, I just noticed there was, very few parents of color present for the small events at school. They was always there for parent teacher night, meet the teacher, things like that. But the midday sports tournament, holiday celebrations, or even just the occasional surprise lunch, I very rarely saw other parents of color, and I'm sure that wasn't because they didn't want to be there. It's kind of a social economic thing, and that can be something for a future episode. But I'm guessing they really just didn't have the luxury at the time. And I enjoyed being there for the little things, and I knew that they enjoyed and appreciated me being there. Another situation I think that may have really, added to the impact of why I wanted to be there so much was I was invited to a orchestra performance before they was born, and at the end of the performance, like I said, we live in suburbia, so um, there's not a lot of black kids here, by ratio. So um, not biracial, by ratio. Um, there's not a lot of black kids, and so we was at this orchestra performance, and after the performance, all the kids was getting flowers and hugs and congratulations and celebrations and high fives. And I just happened to look towards the back, and there was this one lone black kid back there, and they was putting their instrument up and were just kind of standing there waiting to go back to the band room. And man, that first and foremost, that really hurt me, and it really stuck with me. And I knew, I never really wanted one of my kids to be without someone there to represent them for almost anything. And I can honestly say, I've done that and achieved that so far. So, it was really easy for all those reasons. It was really easy for me to dedicate, myself to them because, at the end, like I said, I knew it wouldn't last forever, and I knew that they wouldn't want me to operate in that capacity any longer. So, unfortunately, those days are coming, and one is about to start driving, and he actually just got himself a job, and you know, I knew, for all of the kind of the stated reasons I've said, it was really easy for me to dedicate myself to them because I knew the day would come where they wouldn't really need or want me to operate in that capacity any longer. I knew the day would come that I would say, hey, do you want to do something? And they would say, I can't. I have plans. So I, again, made up my mind a long time ago that it was willing to put in the time because I knew the time would be fleeting and fast. So unfortunately, those days are coming. One is about to start driving, and he just got himself a job. And my youngest one is becoming a teenager, but luckily he still enjoys hanging out with dad a lot. He's my little sports guy, and so we do everything sports and just have these great conversations and stuff like that. So I still have him to fall back on a little bit, but it's exciting to see them grow and become independent, but it really becomes sad. It's really exciting to see them grow and become independent, but it really is sad at times. So yeah, I mean that's just kind of my story, and my quick run through of the journey, of my of journey. So yeah, that's a quick run through of who I am, and like I said, those are my days in the trenches, and why I thought it'd be fun to start this podcast because now I have time. Um, So yeah, that is my story, and just kind of my background of my days in the trenches of being, a dad, all in dad, and why I felt like it was important because I know, a lot of those experiences could very well be important to other people if I tell them, and having other people on, it will be important. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much my story. Um, and I, like I said, I don't claim to be an expert, but I do have a lot of experience. So I guess now it's time for me to start refocusing on myself and the next chapter in my life. By finding something to fill that time, and cue the Dadz Crib podcast. I really want to, share that knowledge, the knowledge I have, and sit down and talk to my friends so we can just hang out and they can share their knowledge, and maybe you will hear something that help you on your journey, or if you're able to come on, maybe you will say something to help somebody else on theirs. So like I'm sorry. So like I said before, I really hope you heard something that will make you want to come back. I hope you heard something, and feel that you want to be a part of the community, and with the Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter, um, YouTube, all under Dad's Crib. So do me a favor and subscribe. And so if you've listened to the first episode, and then listen to this episode, and you've heard something that makes you want to be part of the community, or just kind of keep up with the podcast, and I really hope you will, I'm going to ask you to subscribe. And if you are on Apple, it'd be great if you could rate it and maybe throw a comment down there. you know um, Everything can be found, the private page, I'm sorry, private Facebook page can be found, obviously on Facebook in groups under Dad's Crib, and the YouTube channel is under Dad's Crib. With pretty much everything, Twitter, Instagram is all under Dad's Crib. So I'm going to do the big ask, and that is, anytime you're on Twitter, look me up and maybe give me a follow. If you're on Instagram, just please give me a follow, and look up the YouTube channel. I think it's going to be some really cool stuff there. And, of course, listen to the podcast. I'm hoping that it will be on all platforms soon. But right now, I do know it's on Anchor and Spotify. So, I'm going to wrap this up. And again, as I always say, thanks for hanging out with me today in Dad's Crib.